I wasn't entirely sure if I wanted to make this video. The change in stance on monetization and microtransactions made by Battlestate Games a couple days ago left me, for the first time, feeling confused and, to be completely honest, quite concerned about this game. My biggest feeling was, why? Well, I wanted to find out, and the research that I did over the last few days led me down paths that confused me and scared me, filled me with optimism, and ultimately left me feeling somewhat jaded, like the veneer on a shining facade had been ripped away, leaving the rusted steel skeleton wiring and insulation laid bare to the elements. These monetization plans are, like all things Tarkov, divisive. If you see no issue with the development choices that Tarkov has made over the last few years or going into the future, I'm not setting out to change your mind of that. The data I've found, however, and the conclusions I've drawn from it, leave me for the first time with a feeling that I actually get what is going on with this game. For that reason, while I will present this data I've collected to you first, I highly suggest that you watch through to the end in order to grasp not only what this information means, but why I'm presenting it to you at all. It's important to understand why any of this matters. Since the start of development in 2016, BSG held a firm stance against the monetization models of their contemporaries.
We know that free-to-play developers are constantly inventing new ways to trick people and make more money, and we personally do not want to spoil Escape from Tarkov with this.
Every action and statement by the company over the last year also pointed not only to the stability of their funding, but that they were actually closer than ever to being completely finished with Tarkov as a product, that they were fully funded and pushing towards a 1.0 release, a reality supported in no small part by the removal of the most expensive limited edition of the game from the online store. To many of us, it felt like we were finally closing in on the finish line. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, in the middle of otherwise innocuous patch notes, Tarkov's first microtransactions, namely extra stash lines regardless of game edition, ability to play offline co-op, and faster unlocks of cosmetic clothing. What changed? Here was this claim by the CEO of the company saying, in not so many words, that the game needed more funding. So, where did all the money go? How is BSG spending their money, and why? Well, that's what I wanted to find out. And after looking through their financials, the answer was, well, it's honestly easier explained if we just look at it together. Before we do, I need to lay some ground rules for what I'm presenting here. I'm going to be as objective and fact-based as possible. However, my takeaways from it will be subjective, and you may disagree with them. First off, BSG's financials are more than a little weird. Because Battlestate's development studios are operating in St. Petersburg, Russia, they are actually officially based out of what is, as far as I can tell, a WeWork shell office in London. What matters is, because this is a UK-based company, their financial records are completely publicly available. So I took a look at them. Right off the bat, for the financial year ending January 31st, 2023, Battlestate Games had a turnover, or total revenue, of 65,608,544 Great British pounds. That's 83,911,112 US dollars. There's a little overview statement at the top of the filing. BSG's primary source of revenue, Escape from Tarkov, added more than 900,000 new paid players in the 2022 year. 900,000. That means, on average, those 900,000 players were paying $93 US for their copy of Escape from Tarkov, meaning that there was a good mix of both Edge of Darkness and similar limited edition orders, as well as standard editions in there. You can take whatever you'd like away from that, but moving on, here's where it gets interesting. The cost of sales in 2022, as in how much Battlestate Games spent to distribute this product, was around $79.5 million US. That means that by January 31st, 2023, they had a gross profit and loss of £2.4 million, ending in, with operating costs, investments, expenses, and taxes subtracted, a total profit of $2,178,371 US. We can see that their cost of sales were just under their total revenue that year. If we look at 2021, they didn't even manage that. According to their profit and loss reports, BSG actually ended 2021 with a loss of $905,724 US. That year, they reported an $88.6 million US total revenue. You might be wondering, why am I talking about 2 years ago here? Well, this financial audit of BSG for the 2022 year was only reported on the 30th of October 2023, meaning that we likely won't be seeing anything of BSG's financials for 2023 until fall or winter of 2024. So what happened in 2023? Well, quite a few things actually. I may have gotten a bit in over my head in this next bit, but the research that I did on the financials of games marketing was utterly eye-opening to me. Last year was a special one for the world of Tarkov. We saw the biggest marketing push probably ever by Battlestate Games for the new spin-off Escape from Tarkov Arena. Arena was meant to be a more fun-focused, fast-paced way for fans of EFT to get that juicy player versus player action they yearn for. It was also, and this is the point that you should be most focused on, it was also intended to be a beginner's jumping off point to the Tarkov world, bringing in new audiences to the game. Okay, so in order to market this thing, BSG went to some conventions last year. Some big conventions. As far as I know, BSG had never come to the US in an official capacity, and their presence at TwitchCon Las Vegas in 2023 was legitimately game-changing for the Tarkov community. I even highlighted its importance in a recent video. More fans than ever before got to meet each other, their favorite streamers, the devs. It was a dream community meetup, and not only that, they had this giant, slick booth, totally bringing people into the Tarkov world. People could play Arena early, there were extravagant tournaments between streamers and the devs. It was quite the production, and it was a ton of fun to watch from the sidelines. So how much did it cost? While the actual metrics of the exhibitor floor space at TwitchCon aren't public, we can extrapolate a bit from other conventions. BSG's TwitchCon booth stole the show, a massive custom 40x70 or 2,800 square foot monstrosity. A booth at South by Southwest at half that size would cost around $7,200 a day. That would mean, and this is being lenient, the Arena booth would cost for its size for 3 days around $43,500. At GDC in 2017, a 2,500 square foot booth cost $41,500 a day. Times 3 days, a booth that size would cost $124,000. But yeah, let's just get this straight. I'm not talking about the whole booth setup, all the bells and whistles. No, I mean the price of the literal space it takes up on the floor. We don't know if the people working at the booth, the construction, etc. was part of the budget or if that was all BSG's responsibility. We do know that this booth was a completely custom design done by the convention planning contractor, The Trade Group, on quite short notice, by the way. If we assume a $100 per square foot price point, which would not surprise me at all at the minimum, we're talking in the $100,000 to $200,000 range for this design. Again, I'm talking the lowest possible end here from what I've seen in my research. Okay, that's the physical booth. Then we have the PCs, the internet wired to each of these PCs, dozens of them, the IT to get all that working, headsets, monitors, peripherals. Again, this might have all been taken care of by sponsors, but just putting it out there. The booth had cosplayers, tattoo artists, there were DJ shows, this whole massive on-stage presentation, and again, we're just talking the physical booth. BSG picked up a bunch of major streamers and took them to Battlefield Vegas, a pretty famous company in town that lets you shoot military-grade weapons on a range. This whole outing could have been around $10,000, and again, that's just an afterthought for the whole evening. And I mean that because $10,000 for an evening out with the boys is basically a drop in the bucket when you consider what BSG likely spent on this convention. Oh yeah, and then, actually getting the company and their assets there, shipping, handling, flights, accommodation, food, transportation. These guys came from Russia. So, just throw another, at minimum $10,000 to $20,000 on top of that. If we put this all together, looking at the low end, I can't see them having spent less than $200,000 to $300,000 on TwitchCon. And that would have been if everything went right, if everything that could have been free was. If we're being more realistic, aiming towards how expensive we know some of this stuff can be, well, we're creeping up on $500,000. Battlestate Games went to 4 conventions in 2023. So, you might be thinking, as I definitely was, this is just marketing. This is what companies do. And yes, that is 100% correct. Major gaming companies do this all and much, much more on marketing. With the company supposedly bringing in upwards of $80 million a year, who even cares? Well, that's the issue. When I saw this massive marketing push from BSG over the 2023 year, it actually filled me with confidence. Good for them, I was thinking, because I assumed that they could afford it. Let's break down some realities here. Tarkov controversies aside, probably raked in a similar amount of money in 2023 as it did in 2022, likely a bit more with all the marketing that they did. We also know that Escape from Tarkov Arena, a completely separate game, was developed by BSG likely over the last 1.5 to 2 years. That this standalone game was developed by a separate team of people, potentially many new hires and contractors, and that BSG underwent a massive marketing push for Arena during the 2023 year. We now know that in early 2024, BSG has introduced the idea of purchasable add-ons to Tarkov, never before mentioned, because, in the words of Nikita, the COO, the game has been running for 8 years without any additional cash flow. So here's my concern, and maybe you're picking up where I'm going with this. The fear is that BSG's funding for the completion of Escape from Tarkov, as well as the continued development for Arena, was secured only by the projected profits earned from Arena's sales, boosted by the marketing push over the 2023 year. And I'm concerned that Arena may not have sold as well as they had projected. For whatever reason, maybe because of controversy, maybe because of poor communication by BSG, or maybe because of the game's design itself, people don't seem to be utterly enamored with Arena in the way that BSG was hoping, to put it lightly. No matter how many fireworks you set off, no matter how many tournaments you plan, if people look up a game online and the first thing that they see is this game is disappointing, they might think twice about buying it. And if they staked the production funding of both games on the successful release of Arena after a large multi-million-dollar marketing push, well, it's possible that Battlestate is currently in an over-leveraged position. They may have made a gamble and missed. Okay, so here's where I want to take a pause. Like I said at the very beginning, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to make this video, and that's not because I fear backlash or hate or ridicule. It's because I actually really love this game, and I have a deep, indescribable respect for the pure artistic genius that went into creating what it is. And facing the financial reality of a piece of art that you really adore kind of kills the art of it in a way. Despite the cheeky sort of negative-seeming title, the very last thing that I want to do is kill Tarkov. We don't know exactly what the cost of development at BSG is, where those tens of millions of dollars go, nor should we, to be fair. Something I realized as I was writing this video, the gaming community is hyper-critical of Battlestate games. It's kind of sad, really. We all theoretically love this game, and yet we tear apart every single decision that they make. We look at every aspect of their development under a microscope. I'm not sure if other communities treat their favorite games devs that way, but to be honest, I really don't like the idea of being part of that. To very quickly touch on the cost though, think about this one metric. Tarkov is running 5,000 or more servers according to Nikita. For a minimum of $100 to $300 a month per server, that's anywhere from $6 to as high as $18 to $30 million a year alone. The main concern I had, remember, is that Tarkov's cost of sales went up drastically in 2023, and the sales themselves didn't compensate. We need to touch on those 900,000 new accounts purchased in 2022. I've never given much thought to the idea of cheaters rebuying accounts as a legitimate major source of Tarkov's funding. Seeing that metric was the first time that I had to face it head on. If the concern is that cheaters are funding the game, something that, regardless of how things look, can never be officially proven, we know that anti-cheat is a constant concern of the legit player base, something that we all want to get better. But would not placing the spending power back in the hands of the dedicated, legitimate fanbase through microtransactions in whatever form potentially reduce the power that these cheat providers hold in general over BSG, even if it means BSG going back on their word, which is the lesser of two evils? I'll let you decide, but I think the choice is obvious. At the end of the day, what matters most is that the core tone and vision of the game itself is upheld in one way or another. Its dark and foreboding atmosphere, its deep, brutally challenging and rewarding grind, those things make the game what it is. As long as that remains the case, we'll be okay. Because here's the thing, truly, and I do say this wholeheartedly, what's done is done. If we want the game to succeed, to exist, Nikita has done, I think, the best he can right now. Regardless of how BSG got to where it's currently at, he personally admitted that the game needs more funding. If that is an honest statement on his part, then what else can they do? The choice is fund the game or let it die. If they're really just being greedy, if they really just wanted more money, I think that they would have done this a long time ago. I'm certain that no matter what, the research that I did for this will lead me to never looking at Escape from Tarkov quite in the same way again. But to be honest, Tarkov kind of goes on this yearly hype cycle, from excitement, a huge build and expectations, to some catalyst bringing everyone down to disillusionment with the game, to slowly building that trust back up to a sort of plateau of, yeah, it's Tarkov. And then it happens all over again. For 8 years. 8 years ago, Tarkov was created by a couple people in a room as a browser-based shooter to help them get some extra funding for the massive single-player RPG they knew was out of their budget. Years later, and it's a genre-defining product rivaling and effectively defeating billion-dollar corporations at their own game. But BSG's still an indie studio. They're still making everything up as they go along. Nikita himself stated that seeing the outpouring of community support for the Tarkov world at conventions in 2023 convinced him that sticking with EFT into the foreseeable future and continuing to support it as long as possible was important to him. Perhaps the recent decisions around monetization are a way to assure that that can actually happen. At the end of the day, I, and I'm sure many people over the last better part of a decade, just want to see what a finished version of this game will look like. I'm sure that Nikita and the rest of the team would like that too. If getting to that point means that we wait a bit longer or that people buy a cosmetic add-on here or there, I guess that's just something I might have to learn to be okay with. Thanks for watching.